Hello everybody, welcome back. My name is Daniel Gormani. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome to round 6 of the European Club Cup. My own commentary, my own personal commentary. I don't get paid for this. So I'm going to link my PayPal down below. If you want to contribute to a struggling Grandmaster. Got a few moans and gripes coming up that I'll mention in the course of the video. But yeah, who are we going to be focused on today? What about the women's? Should we focus on the women's? Because one thing I noticed with this, which I don't understand, it says open board. So it's supposed to be these open boards. Oh, these boards are uploaded manually. They're not broadcast in real time. Right, okay. So they don't have those games. Even though they're supposed to, they don't have those games, which is weird. So there's lots of... Because, for example, a lot of the English teams aren't on the top boards in the Open. Unfortunately, they aren't on the top teams, you know. So we can't view their games, which is disappointing in my opinion. You know, we're living in 21st century. Let's have a look at Divya Deshmukh playing against her friend and country mate Ramesh Babu Vayashi. Now I don't have an engine. I'm not doing this. I'm going to try and do an entire broadcast without the engine. How about that? It could be a challenge for me. I always seem to turn on the engine at some point. We could try and do one without the engine. So this is black to move. So clearly white sacked a piece. Let's have a look. Where did they leave theory? Because actually I've analysed this line for my chessable video course. Although it hasn't been released. I haven't even filmed the video part. I've written the course, or I've sent them what I've written. Obviously then the problem with chessable, well I'd say the problem, but chessable is very competitive. So you can make money out of chessable if your course is successful in a way that you probably can't make money out of a lot of other video companies. But because obviously so many people are looking at the same thing and making courses for chessable, it's not easy to get the course produced because you know there's a big waiting list of like people trying to. Now you have a certain amount of people working for the company who are working to upload the course. So C5, yeah, this is one of the main lines. This is so Queen D7 is very popular now. It used to be that Queen D6 the main move. Probably Queen D7 is more popular. I think other moves are inferior. I think Queen D8 is not quite as good. It's still playable. So white generally will try to regain the pawn. A6 is a very typical move that black will play because at some point they want to play B5. They also want to prevent any kind of incursion into that square. So these players are extremely well prepared. They work very hard on chess. I'd imagine with the Indian players, I mean don't get me wrong, they're very good players, the women players, but imagine one of the advantages they have possibly is they probably work with the male players like the 2700 plus players. Now if you're a male 2500 player, you're not necessarily going to work with 2700 players. The same thing in China. Maybe I'm just jealous, I'm probably just jealous, right? The same thing in China is that the top Chinese women players will work with the top Chinese men players. I've never really worked with a 2700 player. I think it would have helped my chess. Obviously, it's going to help your chess, right? Let's say you're a golf fan, you're practicing with Phil Mickelson every day, or Tiger Woods, or you know Scotty Scheffler, or Jordan Spieth, or Rory McIlroy, John Ram. You know you're going to improve, right? More than if you're, you know, maybe you'd say 500th in the world or something, and you're practicing with other players of 500 world, you're not quite going to improve as much. Obviously, they're good players in their own right. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Via Shilly, the fact that he's brothers with Prague obviously helps her, but then it probably helps him that he's brother of her. So, you know, it works both ways. So bishop E3. Yeah, not the only move possibly. Maybe white could have, but I think black was very typical in this line that black will play bishop C5. Actually could have maybe played. But white will often go for concrete ideas. For example, if you go bishop c5 here, you have to calculate moves like knight takes e6. So white will often play this line concretely. In my experience of studying this line, black can survive the opening early middle game. They're generally doing quite well here because they have this solid position with the 4 pawns in front of their king. They're going to castle kingside, but not always easy to do that. And white demonstrates that with this amazing knight e6 move. Or is it amazing? We're not sure, but clearly big initiative. Black played king e7, interesting move. So inviting a possible repetition that you could go rook e6 and come back, and then that would lead to a draw. However, there are other moves. Clearly. What about just simply going g5, for example? Why is that not a good option for white? I'd imagine you're probably not going to take this pawn because of rook e1 check, or just taking on f6 as check. So if I go knight d7, rook check, I can't go back here because of rook d7. Yeah, because if king f8, rook d7, bishop c8, there's rook d8 check. So king d8, now here, you go here, here, and then rook b7. Not so clear, right? What have I got? 2 pawns with a piece. I could take here. Now I've got 3 pawns. Quite significant. Is that the best that black can do in that line? If white goes simply g5. It's not the only move. You could also go knight h5. Oh, hang on, it's possible I'm missing something big here. I mean, what her idea behind king... Spicy went king e7. Why didn't... I guess maybe that just really doesn't slow white down, because h6 you go h4. Maybe you have to go... Because if you allow g5 rook d7, you're in trouble. So this goes king d7. If g5 knight h5, maybe. My gut feeling is white's a lot better here somehow. And it's interesting now, obviously, you go a while back, and Viashili was considered the most promising. It's almost a reflection of what's happening in the men's scenario in the Indian, amongst the Indian players, is that Pragg was considered the most promising for a long time. Pragg was actually, out of those 3, Arjun and Gukesh, Pragg was the first one to really, because I remember Gukesh talked about this, he would look up to Pragg when he first started getting into chess, because he was like the famous one that was playing in all these like World Juniors and stuff. And Pragg, Divya was probably considered to be behind Viashili, but now recently she's kind of jumped ahead of her, so that's an interesting scenario. But on the other hand, Viashili's a GM, Divya's not. I don't believe she's got enough GM norms yet. She may have one from the Olympiad. I'm not sure. Did she get Olympiad norm there? Certainly performance would have been GM level, no problem, but did she play enough GMs? It used to be the case actually, you could get the GM title simply by playing in the Olympiad, but I think they might have changed that rule, because I think there was one Olympiad, it might have been in Greece, in Thessaloniki, in something like 1988, when Georgia came very close to beating Hungary, which is Hungarian sisters had the Polgar sisters. Sorry, the Hungarian women's team had the Polgar sisters. Later on, Judith would play for the men's team. She said she didn't want to play for the women's team ever again. She didn't want to play in the women's competitions ever again, because she said, well, basically, we won pretty much every game, and we still almost didn't win it, which is ridiculous. Because Georgia, one of their players, Kitty Van Arakamir, scored 11 out of 11, which is a crazy score, right? Probably playing on a bit of a lower board, but still. Georgia, by the way, I learned something earlier that, I knew already that Stalin was from Georgia, but the famous Soviet head of police Beria, Leverante Beria, who was a sort of sadist, basically, sadistic character, was also from Georgia. So it's kind of like a bad period of Georgian history in a way. That these two monsters from history were both Georgian. I believe actually that Trotsky. Sorry, well, no, yeah, Trotsky I think was from Ukraine, right? Yeah, Trotsky was from Ukraine. So Trotsky was born in a kind of village in Ukraine. It was sort of like farmland, sort of farm area of Ukraine, in the countryside. And his original name was something like Lev Davidovich or something. Oh my god. Lev Davidovich Bronstein. So he had the same name. He had the same surname as David Bronstein. He was obviously a famous chess grandmaster, but they weren't related apparently. Although there were some rumours that they were, but they weren't. And Lenin, that wasn't his original name. His original name was Ulyanov, and he was born in I think he was born in Kazan, which is in Russia. And his brother, part of the reason why he became this kind of bloodthirsty Bolshevik and hated the Romanovs and hated the kind of, imperialistic rule, was because his brother was executed due to a bomb plot to kill Nicholas. No, hang on, let me get this right. Nicholas. It wasn't Nicholas II. It was Alexander II, who was. I think he was killed by that same plot. Maybe he's actually was blown up. I believe there was some kind of bomb plot as he was crossing a bridge in St. Petersburg. He was blown up as he got out of the carriage. He survived initially, but they took him back to the Winter Palace and he died of his wounds. And I think Nicholas II witnessed his death, and he was later executed himself much later. So yeah, I find all that Russian history fascinating. I don't know how we got onto that subject, but so what's happening in this game? Oh, so he's gone King F7, but I also wondered about G5. So I'm imagining this position is probably quite bad for Black. Could be wrong. Come back to that game. What's happening with Zeuginas? He's quite a well-known player now. I played in the same tournament in Alicante. What do people think of women's chess? Do they think that women should be in separate teams, and is that a good idea? Or I made the point that I think it works well for this competition because obviously then you have more women involved in the competition. I made the point that for the Olympiad you could have a separate women's board. People didn't necessarily agree with this. I think most people are against it. You could have a separate women's board that where you have to have a woman on your team. But didn't seem to get much support. So knight a5, knight c4. Yeah, good position. It's good positional play by white. Often this kind of play is about whether white can really get their plan in. Because if b3 you have knight a5, and if queen a5 bishop b3, and there's no tactics with rook b3 because queen b3, and then this knight is defended. So the rook's defended by the knight, so it doesn't quite work. If she takes there, white's kind of got the position she wants with kind of some sort of domination. So bishop e3 is a good move, I would say, because you're stopping knight c5, you're just going to chop it off. If knight e4, then bishop b6. Yeah, so knight d7 makes a lot of sense as well, trying to bring the knight to c5. Oh wow, so he took. Maybe this is overlooked by black, but what else? You could play that knight. Was that a better option? Or was there still this problem with knight? No, it doesn't quite work there, does it? Because you just... Oh no, maybe it does actually. It still works, because if you take with a pawn, I have d6. So she went Yeah, I mean, otherwise the position's uncomfortable. Okay, so she's sacked a piece, but she's getting a lot of play. You know, well, you have to take, because otherwise knight c6 is nasty, or you just lost a pawn for nothing. So you have to take. And again, knight c6 is a threat, so she won't bishop d7. Knight c6 is a huge threat. If knight e4, then knight c6 is probably just winning for white, I would imagine. Or very strong for white. Too lazy again. It doesn't look good. I mean, there's knight e4, there's knight c6, queen d6, and probably got lots of moves there. But just knight e7, queen e7, bishop f4 seems to win material. I mean, maybe there's other stuff, I don't know. Yeah, so now you're winning back the piece. If you move the knight, you're winning back the piece. So she is winning back the piece. When rook d, wow, good game by white actually. But maybe good game by black as well. Rook bishop takes b2. I mean, generally these cases, your c-pawn is going to be very strong. So you could take on. I imagine white's winning it. My gut feeling is white's winning. Although you do have this pawn is obviously an asset. So you could take on b8 and go c7. So one line is rook b8, c7, rook c8, rook d1. Now black's only move is bishop f6. However, that might be sufficient, because if e5, I could go knight c3, for example, and you don't have time for ef6 because of knight d1. And you know, if I go bishop b6 in that line, then you go b2, for example. Nothing else, probably other moves actually. Because if bishop f5 is no threat, because I'm going to queen if you take on c8, so I could just go g6 or knight c3 would be winning for black. So also c7 immediately is maybe possible, don't know. But then rook c8. I mean, it feels winning, right? I mean, it's also rook c4 is an option here, because if knight c3, so this position is a very difficult example of just concrete calculation. You know, it's just concrete calculation. There's no real strategy involved now. You've done the strategy bit. It's just it's going to be a test of your calculation. So rook, which is generally with Chinese players, they're very good at calculation. They train their calculation all the time. I mean, rook c4. So I was wondering about c7, because c7, if you take on c1, I just take on b8 and that's game over. With a pawn, probably. Well, I can also take with a rook. It's also winning. If you take on b7, I queen. Now you can't take on c8 because a rook takes c8. And if you take on c1, I guess I can just take back. Actually, I can take on b7. That's even stronger, probably. Yeah, I mean, you have b2, but I just don't believe it's enough. Like bishop c2 is probably good enough. So c7, rook c8 is critical, but then rook c4. And if knight c3, I have rook takes b3. And if knight b1, I have rook takes b2, which must be winning. Knight a3. Actually, yeah, maybe it's still kicking, right? Because knight a3. If rook c6, then knight b5. I mean, don't get me wrong, this doesn't look good, because bishop f4 is probably tremendous. Although then knight d4, maybe. I mean, yeah, there might be other. It wouldn't surprise me if there's cleaner ways for white. It feels winning for white, this position anyway, so that's what we think. How's Dinara Wagner getting on? She's a player who has been getting good results lately. She's German. Wagner. It's like a composer, right? Does anyone like classical music? Famous composer, German composer, Wagner. What was his first name? Should know. Richard Wagner. He wrote these operas, you know, like the Ring Cycle, Siegfried, and all that kind of stuff. And I think they had these kind of, what are they called? Tammerhausen, maybe that was another one. Wasn't there some kind of festival associated with Wagner? I think Hitler used to go along to those festivals. So there were some rumours that I think Wagner's widow was like a sort of anti-Semite. It's a little bit like Friedrich Nietzsche, who's a famous philosopher, wrote. What did he write again? Will to Power. What was it? It's something like Spake Zarathustra or something like that. Very famous book that he wrote. It's about the sort of like, you know, how man should aspire to greatness, and not all men are basically equal. Some are greater than others. A lot of the philosophy, I think, was about that. And he wasn't an anti-Semite, but I believe his sister was. And she used a lot of his philosophies later to support the kind of Nazi regime. So what do we think about this position that they've reached in the game? Seems quite good for black, I would say, mainly because of the lack of development on the white king side. I mean, you can go rook c1, but then there's moves like d4, which are all very awkward to me, although there is c4 in that line, I suppose. I mean, how else do you defend the pawn? I mean, it feels like the only way you can defend the pawn. You could give up the pawn. You could go something like e3 is another possibility. Feels very uncomfortable for white, this. Okay, so let's go back. What about Elizabeth Patz? How's she going on? Against... I saw this, it was like her dad was posting about her earlier on Facebook. Where's she from? I don't know where she's from, but... Yeah, so very sharp King's Indian stuff. Elizabeth Patz is a very well prepared player. I've known her for many years. I first met her, I think, when she was about 17 or something like that. In Wroxham in 2000. I don't know when she was born, actually. She might have been 15 then, or too young, basically. And very young, I should say. Oh Lord. But I think she was 17 at the time. But she's from East Germany. Very sort of powerful personality. If you take on c5, the general idea is I'm going to bring the queen out and then attack this pawn. I could also regain. So something like this is not necessarily in white's favour. Something to consider. But d5 is the typical response. I think h3 is also a move there as well. Yeah, that's a clever move. It might well be that white could have maybe considered playing h3 before castling. But if h3, I think black might go b5. That might be the problem. You have a queen a5 idea. Like, it's very typical in these kind of setups. Going to get very good play. I'm wondering actually... Could you even gone b5 there? Oh no, I think there's some line with e5, right? Yeah, I've seen this before. So she went nice. As I said, she went well prepared. Because b5, I think I played this against Serrano blitz game, and he blitzed out e5. He knew it all, right? Yeah, and that's actually dangerous for black because knight g4, bishop g5, and if you take it, white's better. So Elizabeth would have been aware of that. So he played knight bd7. But I think if h3, then then b5 is more legitimate, because now e5 is not going to have the same power behind it, I guess. Also possible maybe for white, but he castled anyway, so I suspect they were both in their prep. a4 looks natural just to stop this expansion. King's Indian is such a fascinating over, so incredibly complex. Knight e5, f4, knight goes back. I wonder if maybe it would possibly bring that knight to e5. Possible. Sure would it, but then again, still white would have gone knight e2. I played Lizzie before, so I played him in that Roxham tournament. I played her in that Roxham tournament. I won. But then maybe a few months later we played in Cannes, and I played her in a Sicilian. I was white. I played his Mike Basman Bishop e2 Sicilian. Didn't play it well, and she played nice games. He beat me, so it was. I think it was 1-1 overall. I don't think I've played her since then. That was going back a long time. Like, you're talking about 20 odd years. Bishop d7, yeah, a little bit passive by black, but fine, you know. I don't think these kind of ideas like e5 are working yet. So king h1, yeah, this is all making sense. I mean, maybe you could consider a5, but that would allow bishop p5 for example. Slow build up h3, just trying to prevent black from breaking out effectively. Just went there. Could you? I mean, could you consider that move, or is that just bad? No, it's sort of like the move you want to do, because that knight is kind of out of the game, right? So one idea is if you take on the tab out the knight. So maybe f5 was an option. I mean, I feel like this position is clearly quite decent for black, because you hit the bishop and the bishop drops back. By the way, if anyone's running, well, I'm not playing Scarborough. I often play Scarborough, but this year I just didn't have any money. I couldn't afford it. And the thing is, even though it's 700 first, I mean, it's kind of worth playing in a way, because my upside is probably quite good, but you still have to pay out the entry fee. You have to pay out the. I should turn the light on in here actually. It's getting quite dark. Gets dark very early now. Very early. Yeah. So you have to, I mean, I quite like Scarborough. I quite like playing there, but I didn't play this year because just the entry fee is maybe about 40 odd quid. It's not a huge amount for the entry fee, but I probably need at least 2 nights accommodation, maybe 3, right? Probably 2 nights accommodation. So you're looking at what, maybe 100 quid for that. Then the travel, you're looking at maybe about another 100 quid, maybe 90 quid for the travel. So in total, you're looking at about 250, just basic expenses almost, plus the food. You're looking at over 300 quid. That is the reality. I mean, I could have played this tournament, the European, because my team in the 4NCL, Blackthorn, is playing this. And this would have been a nice tournament to play. But again, the expense is very high, you know, and the team weren't going to pay my conditions. So, yeah, this is the reality of being a chess player. I mean, the problem is my rating's been going down for a while. Yeah, I think after f5, probably maybe there's some idea of why going e5 possibly, or also bishop f3 is an option. You take. Is this? Oh, maybe this is. Yeah, this is probably why she rejected it, which makes a lot more sense, right? Because what I forgot about is the knight can't take because this knight is jumping in. So you pretty much, I guess queen b8 looks too passive. You have to go here, I guess, but then you still take. This is good for white, I would imagine, because if bishop takes, take here, but bishop f3 is looking very strong. That's just winning actually, because queen drops back, bishop b7. And if you do this move, then I can go. It's very typical break in these kind of Benko Benoni type systems, is to play e5. So you're going back to what I was saying about, yeah, but the problem is the expenses would have been very hard. I've had to pay flights plus the hotel in this tournament. It's a lot of money going out. Don't get any conditions. So I was mentioning earlier about I'm not necessarily playing a lot of these tournaments. I've not been asked to play the London Classic FIDE Open, for example. There's no condition for that I've heard of. No one's asked me. I've not been asked to play Hastings either. It's very disappointing. I mean, I won the British Rapid Player. I thought people would look at that and say, "Oh, he's got some form." I'm being ignored. Yeah, my rating's lower than it was, but that's true of pretty much every active player, professional player over 45. I would say. I mean, if you could name me somebody who's over 45 who's been fairly active over the last 2 or 3 years, which I've been, or even going back even further, over the last 5 years, has been fairly active over the last 5 years. Obviously, we had lockdown as well to take into account. Who hasn't lost points? I'd be surprised. There are not many who haven't lost points. There have been quite a few that have dropped a load. People like Keith Falk and Mark Hebden, they're below 2380 now. They're 2370. Okay, they're older than me. There's also I mean, there's a French guy called Izatrescu who was 26. I think I've mentioned him before. He was 2670 going back 10 years ago. He's now 2370. So I think I'm actually doing fairly well, considering I've been fairly active and I'm still running. I'm competing. Most of the people I play, 24-20, that sort of level, with similar rating to me, are much younger players who are like 30 years younger. So from that perspective, I'm doing fairly well. But yeah, it's disappointing I'm not getting invited to these British tournaments that I was getting invited to, say, going back 5 or 6 years ago. I was getting invited to London Classic before. I'm not getting invited to it now. So that's disappointing from my perspective. I didn't get invited to Cambridge this year either. So you get to a point where if you're not getting invited to those sort of tournaments, like, why are you even bothering? Like, you know, maybe I should just quit and just do a normal job, because I'm not like I was getting invited to the candidates right before, or the Viscount's A group or anything like that. You know what I mean? But I was getting invited to like opens that I could realistically play in because they were in England, and now I'm not even getting that. So that's very disappointing. Anyway, going back to this game, a nice get to the moan off my chest. So White now has the option of taking the bishop, but I feel like White is clearly better here. So maybe Lizzie has not done the best job with her opening, because it feels already like White is bossing the game. It doesn't seem like Black has really got much to do here. She's gone for G5 though. That makes a lot of sense. Fine for the dart squares. Maybe she could have also done that earlier as well. White plays knight d1. Yeah, typical move that very strong players play now. Just manoeuvring move, and her idea is to bring the knight to e3. However, I'm wondering if Black can go c4. Was that some sort of blunder by White? Because if here, then knight d3, right? So what are you doing after c4? Oh, queen e3. Right, there's something I missed. Yeah. Because if here now, I could take on h6. I could also move the rook. If you take on h6, queen h6, there's knight e1, rook e1, queen b6, but then queen f6. By all means, engine check this rubbishy analysis. But yeah, all I can do really is work harder and try and get my rating up. But the problem is I don't play enough tournaments. Like recently I've been playing very well. But I haven't gained that many points. It's a hard road back to 2500. It's a really hard road, especially at my age. I don't think I'll get the 2500. I might get the 2450. I probably need to get the 2500 to get back to that point where they're going to start offering me these tournaments again. All I can do is work hard and hope to get back to a decent kind of a rating again, where I can expect to maybe gain. If I keep going down, if I go down to 2370, which is a realistic possibility, then it's going to get even tougher. So to get any kind of conditions, yeah, it's a depressing reality of being a chess player, I suppose. You get older and you get weaker. Although ironically, I don't think I am any weaker. I think it's just the fact that, as I said before, there's a lot of deflation in the system. These kind of players, like, maybe not Lizzie so much, she's maintaining her reign, but Gao, people like that are gaining. People like Divya are gaining because they're younger. They've got the energy to work, 5-6 hours a day on chess, and they're just good players and they're going to improve. So you could look at them and say, well, they're gaining, why can't you gain? But they're much younger, so you can't really compare yourself with them, I don't think. But these are the kind of players. Like I said, all the older players, Zhu Jin's gaining, Nurgle's, Salimova's gained over last year. All these kind of players are gaining. Dinara Wagner. I'm not gaining because I'm older, but show me a player who's older who has gained. That was why Rouses was such a sort of like a outlier, and why people were suspicious of him, because he was like in his. I shouldn't really keep going about that guy because he did die after all. It's very sad that he died, but he was sort of in his, I think, late 40s, early 50s when he started doing all this dodgy stuff with the phone going into the toilet, and he sort of went from like being a low, sort of like high 2400 guy to being 2640, which is ludicrous. So he was higher than Karpov when he sort of stopped, or when he was stopped, which is crazy, right? And people are like, yeah, this is legit. He's just basically he's just started working hard. And I was like, well, there's a reason why you've been 20. It doesn't matter about the hard work. There's a reason why you've been 24, 80 for the last 25, 30 years, while the guy's not, had that kind of rating of like 2600 plus, is because he's got serious weaknesses in the game. It doesn't matter how much you work on it, you're probably not going to be able to rectify those weaknesses. And you're not suddenly going to change your personality at that much older age. And other people are saying, well, basically he's doing it because he's cherry picking people, he's farming people, and he's gaining rating that way. But the reality of the situation is you're going to drop points against low rated players. That's why the rating is what you are. You're not going to be able to beat them at that sort of rate. So it's just unrealistic that someone's going to change their personality to work hard enough to get. And I think realistically there's a limit. Like if I started working on chess for say 5-6 hours a day, studying chess every day hard, trying to improve my game for 5-6 hours a day, I would improve, but there's a limit beyond which I wouldn't improve. I don't have the chess IQ of like some of the top guys. So no matter how hard I work, I'm not going to get as good as Abdu Sattarov or something like that. I might get as high rated as Divya Deshmukh. I might get to 2500. That's about it. And it's like, it's not really going to change your life anyway. You're not going to get like a sum of money because you got 2500. Anyway, I've been moaning a lot on this, getting fed up with the whole situation really. Need to do a big moan on Facebook and see how much support I get. I mean, Keith did that big moan about I wouldn't say moan, but he was talking about not being selected for the which I mentioned on one of my videos. I think, yeah, fair enough in a way, because you have to stand up for yourself. If you don't rate yourself, no one else is going to do it for you. But I thought in a way it's also kind of brave, because you kind of putting yourself out there and say, look, yeah, I'm good. Not everybody backs themselves like that. Fair play. But I think sometimes you also have to accept the reality that you're getting older and you're getting weaker. And when you get older and you get weaker, certain things you had before are going to dry up. That's the reality. This is why people retire, because they're not as good as they were at their job. But in chess, you can't really retire because there's no pension, there's no kind of, like chess was all you did. You see, like with Kramnik now, he's acting out all the time because he's probably bored. He did the chess before. He's got too much time on his hands now. Yeah, this looks I quite like what White is doing in a way, although he has lost the pawn. Both of these players have been doing well recently. So he's sacked a pawn. I played Gorinchina online. Alexandra, she's a good player. I mean, I lost her on chess.com. I mean, she's a proper player. I lost her in a blitz game. Don't think I've ever played against Bibisara. She's a bit younger, I think. They're both quite young. So rook e1 makes sense now with the idea of rook f3. What do you do after rook e1? I'm wondering about bishop e4 actually. That kind of screams out at me as it being a candidate move. Because putting the bishop in an aggressive position, if you go here I can just drop back. Now you don't have... Well, I suppose you have g4, but that's kind of a weakening move. I mean, there's also ideas like bishop d3 maybe, but that's probably over-egging the pudding. I could simply go back to d7. I don't see anything wrong with that move. But there's rook f3, right? A little bit annoying. Don't think you're going to take on a5 because d4's hanging. Let's go back to the Divya game. Knight g8 was played. Divya to move. What's the pawn count? It's clear that black is the one who's under pressure. However, it's this kind of... How many pawns have we got? We've got 1, 2, 3. I believe we've got full compensation, materially speaking, because we've got 6 against 3. So piece is normally considered to be worth 3 pawns. However, in the endgame, the pawns are often more important, so that's something to take into account. Your pawns are doubled. You can't really play c4 because if you go rook d7, knight e7, rook a7 as rook e8. I kind of feel like maybe she's messed it up a little bit, Divya. There was stronger ideas, and yeah, bishop d5 is a brilliant tactical defence, which had to be seen in advance. So a lot of players would simply reject this and go king f8, but clearly she felt after king f8 g5 is big trouble. But that's what I was wondering about g5, because now you wouldn't necessarily have this bishop d5 defence, right? Because if, let's say knight d5, I just take on d5, bishop d5, rook b8 and rook d5, and I've got technically winning rook and pawn endgame. And we mentioned this variation before, that this was quite good for white. I felt. Should we have a quick look at the men's? Let's see what's happening in the men's event. We'll come back to this maybe. Arjun versus Vidit. Probably going to end in a draw, right? But Arjun has been doing incredibly well lately, as everybody knows. He just got over 800 on live ratings. He's playing his compatriot Vidit. What is Arjun? What is so good about Arjun? People don't really know him, I don't think. Like, what is good about him? Why has he got so strong? I guess it's just hard work, right? It's like with most of these things, like how do you get good at anything? You just work hard. This kind of looks drawish to me, because if you go rook d2, I have rook a7, rook d3 and rook b7. I don't think either side's got enough to win this. Black can always tuck the king away in h7 and be reasonably safe with his king. If anyone's slightly better here, I would say black, but I don't think it's enough to win the game. I think this is probably going to be a draw. Yi Wei, he was better earlier when I checked the engine evaluation on this game. I haven't checked it since, but this still looks quite reasonable for white. Rook takes b7 is screaming out at me. There's also queen b7. Yi Wei is a guy who was phenomenally strong when he was a junior. He stopped playing for we didn't really stop playing, but he stopped playing, as much. For many years he was doing his studies, and obviously they had the COVID lockdown, which made it tough for Chinese players to travel. But he seems to be doing, he's back to his best now, and he's really sort of kicked on, and he's playing incredibly well as well. The last couple of years he's played as well as anyone. Of course, he won that Vaikanze in a playoff against Gukesh. I think people didn't realise how strong Gukesh was then. When he was playing that, he got to that playoff. I think people were like, yeah, but they didn't realise, how strong Gukesh was already. But Rugby 7 feels like a move. You're hitting a 9. Yeah, this is unpleasant for Vincent. I think he's in trouble. But he might be able to survive. Rook B7, Rook D8, maybe, and turning Bishop C5 or Queen C4 at some point. Maybe Queen C4 isn't really a threat. Yeah, I'd much prefer to be white here. I think, obviously, anybody would. I think if you take on B7, you're going to be a pawn up. I believe, what's the pawn count? Maybe even more than a pawn up. You're going to be like 1, 2... Yeah, this is winning for white, yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You've still got your 8 pawns, right? Against 5. But they're all doubled. Yeah, Rook B7 wins for white. Even Queen B7. I'm terrible at counting material, but this is actually 8 pawns. You've still got your 8 pawns left, but because they're all double, doesn't look like you're like that much material up. So completely winning for white this position. What's happening in this game? Yeah, white looks better here. If you take on E5 over Rook E1. Again, I'm rubbish at counting material, but this seems to be that white is a pawn up at this point, right? You've got 4 against 3. So you probably, if you want to, you could actually take on C5 though, and then take on E5. Maybe that's a better way to do it. Yeah, okay, so probably this is just equal, right? Because after Bishop C5, Knight E5, Rook E1, you have F6, and then don't really have a good way of trying to pin that the Knight on E5 because Bishop D4, you have Knight D4. And actually, in some ways, Black could maybe claim they've got a better structure, could try to play for a win later in the game. So Parham isn't completely out of this. Well, you could take on E5 immediately because after Knight E5, Rook E1, F6, Knight D5, this is Bishop C5. So actually, the more I look at it, I was wrong with my initial evaluation. Black is more than okay. Although Knight E5, there is Knight A6, right? Which is slightly awkward. Then Bishop F2, King F2, Rook H2 check is another variation, needs to be calculated. It's very unclear because after King... Yeah, where do you go with your King actually? That's, yeah, because King G1, you have Knight F3, King F1, Knight takes G3 checkmate. Or Knight E3 checkmate. So Knight E5 immediately is also possible. So actually, the more I look at this, the more I think I'd rather be black, but possibly odds on a draw. Gurel one, I think I saw that earlier. How's Gukesh doing? He's white. He drew... did he play yesterday? I'm feeling he didn't play. Maybe. But he lost the previous round, right? But what's the pawn count here? As I said before, I'm rubbish at counting pawns. White seems to be a pawn up. No, I'm wrong again. It's equal pawns, sorry. Do you give a lot of credence to material when you play your games, or do you not bother talking to the audience? If there is an audience, I don't tend to get many. I tend to get more views on like, Kramnik has just done this, or somebody just got banned for cheating, or somebody just punched somebody. those kind of chess drama videos. I wonder if anyone's kind of unsubscribed from a chess channel before because the person was the presenter was talking too much about chess. You know, they were discussing chess too much, and they said, "Oh, this is boring. I want a chess drama channel." Yeah, I mean, my guess is this is probably going to be a draw, right? Alanjov is, but there is, you know, it's easy to write it off. Sure, maybe this is more unpleasant than you realise because I'm going to go rook e3 and maybe gain some kind of attack on. I mean, it's really White's only real plan of trying to win the game, right? Okay, so he's confidently played g5. So if hg, rook g4 is king f6, or rook g4, rook f2 actually. So take, rook f5 as a move. Possible, but then there's maybe king. What do you do after takes rook f5? There's no real threat there because of rook g5, rook f2 anyway. Sure what you do. Maybe you could play something like king d7. Oh, rook a4 actually. It just allow you to take on g5. It's possible. Yeah. Still tricky because they're not threatening rook e5, right? Because king f6 is rook. I mean, imagine draw, right? But it's still quite tricky. What about this game? Oh, that's interesting because. Yeah, I thought White was doing. I quite like White's position out the opening, but it seems to me that Pragananda has navigated it quite well. Yeah, this is a very typical idea that White will adopt in these kind of positions is to blockade the c5 square. Okay, so he didn't have to take that pawn, but he decided to take the pawn. Could have maybe carried on with rook c4 or something like that. Okay, this is interesting. He's gone for this kind of aggressive plan. Now, if you play me like queen a5, there is queen a2. I'm not sure what is going on there. My guess is this is probably a draw, you know, like Black's a pawn is very powerful and compensates for White's extra pawn. Maybe there's also plans of maybe going g5 and then trying to activate the knight to d5 and then bring the knight to c3. If you could get that in. You don't go knight f6 immediately because of queen c8 check. Well, I suppose there's still queen fa, but I don't think you go knight f6. Probably, yeah, I mean, maybe g5 is an option. Keith Arkle's favourite chess move is the move g5, but something you'd have to calculate here very closely because this is very, very sharp. You know, it's going to come down to calculation. The g5, there's king e2, knight f6, bishop c4 is one possible variation. I don't know. Oh, but then queen a5, queen a2, knight e4 maybe. I'm very tempted to check the edge of it. What is the top move? I would be tempted to go g5. I will check the edge of it. I'm going to break my promise and say we'll end the stream around about here anyway. Is g5 the top move? It's actually g6. What about my g5 move? Almost as good, right? Yeah, it prefers black. Yeah, it surprised me actually because doesn't surprise me because the more I look at this position, this a pawn is very dangerous. So where did White go wrong? So White was doing reasonably well. This is all fine, what he did. I think he took the pawn too quickly because I think, generally speaking, you don't want to take the pawn. No, it said that's okay. Rook d1. Bishop f1 was the start of the problems. Rook d1 was better. This is tough to play though. Well, who's going to go rook d1? Because your natural human inclination is that the rook on c1, you want to exchange it, right? But rook d1 is better because this is how you beat strong players like Maxim Chigaev. I think I had beaten that guy online actually. He's formerly Russian, but now he's representing Spain, because Spain is obviously, that's a country that is more, they've got more tournaments, and obviously people don't want to live in Russia. A lot of Russian chess players don't want to live in Russia anymore because they're not happy with what's going on with the Operation Ukraine, all that kind of stuff, the special operation. This is creating big practical problems for White. Let's just say, this is how you beat good players. You create problems that are not easy to solve. That's exactly what Prag's done. You know, I made that video before, and I actually still stick with that. That I think Prag will end up. It's hard to say who'll end up being the top Indian player, which will probably be more certain in about 3 or 4 years' time. Who is looking like the top gun? Could well be Arjun. He's the top gun at the moment. Got to knock him off. The other guys are younger though, so they're a little bit younger than he is. But I made it the point. I think I still think I've still got faith in Prag, and I think he's going to do special. I think they're all going to do special things, you know. So I wouldn't be surprised if an Indian player, one of these Indian players, won one of the World Rapid or Blitz. Maybe not both, but one of. You know, I made the point that I quite like Gukesh to win. So actually now it is saying the top move is g5, has changed its mind. So my g5 natural inclination, it's kind of a natural move, right? But apparently he should have gone here immediately, which is tough to see, and then you go here, and then after queen here. Yeah, that's quite an obvious line though. Why didn't he go queen d5, say for example, why didn't he just go here now? Oh, because of b, it's so tough to see that b4 is crushing. Very nice. So you go queen e1 immediately, and then you go queen a5. That's almost like, yeah, amazing, fascinating. Okay, let's just check. How close were we with the engine of ours on these games? I said this game was unclear. I mentioned a move bishop e4. That was actually the top move and the move played in the game. That struck me as being the most obvious move. And that was fine, and black's fine. Weirdly enough, black is actually better here, which surprises me. That's interesting. Yeah, just again how you lose games, you misevaluate them. Because I thought white was doing really well at one point. I said g5, but apparently, okay, misavow by me, because I thought this is tremendous for white. I thought this was good for white, but it's a misavow because apparently it's not good for white. So what he did was correct, right? So this is all correct, but maybe not taken. Yeah, so it was always fine. What about the Pats game? Was it any other game? There's also the Zujina game. We mentioned that earlier, didn't we? That we said that white was doing very well, and yeah, I think I also mentioned that move. No, not the best, bad move by me. But I did mention that there are alternatives. Rook c4 is the best. She took actually, which is another good option. Not the best. That was the first option I mentioned. But apparently, rook c4 is a better way. Yeah, I thought here knight c3 was possible. Knight c3 was no good, no? Oh, rook d7, right, okay, fair enough. Hard to see all this. So all this is correct. Ah, but that's a big blunder. So you should queen the pawn and then go king e8. Yeah, it's surprising he went for this line. He didn't have much time, but it's a blunder. So C's going to lose, we think, probably. Zujina's doing very well. And this game we felt that white was the one who was bossing the game, and this seems to be the case because Lizzie have only chances to survive here. What was the mistake? It seems like white was doing okay. Black, black was doing okay, but slightly passive position, everyone want to have the pawn and f6 and the king's Indian. Yeah, I mentioned that move, which is not the best, but apparently bringing the other knight in was maybe you got to play more aggressively here, because if you just sit there, it seems like she's ended up in a very bad position. Yeah, a5 is also positionally. That's a move you just throw in automatically, right? I mentioned f5 here, but yeah, we said that e5 was good. So you kind of have, but this is just unpleasant position. I mentioned that move, but then yeah, queen e3 is just good. Good, not queen b4 because knight b3. Queen e3 is good for white. Sorry, this is just horrible for black. You don't have to go e5 about it. You just come in here, and if you take here, then yeah, not so easy. Maybe rook e4, queen g3 is the problem, or just general positional domination. Yeah, queen g3. But see, when e5, maybe Lizzie did not react in the best way, because she should go fe. That's correct. Yeah. Oh, the best move here is knight h8. Wow, that's tough. So tough to find. e4 is a bad move. Okay, I think we're going to end the stream here. Well, thanks for watching, people. Leave your comments down below. What do you think? Do you like these kind of commentaries? Don't get. I got 70 or over 70 comments on the Cramley video. Hardly get any comments on these videos. To me, actually looking at chess is far more interesting than doing all this boring chess drama. You know, pandering to these narcissistic idiots. Do you agree with me that these videos are more interesting? Do you agree with me that maybe I should have got an invite to some of these English tournaments? It's very depressing. I feel like I've had one of my best ever years chess-wise, and just nothing. She's blundered horribly there, by the way. That's interesting. Will Lizzie take advantage? I think she probably will. Wow, it's a beautiful idea. Knight g5. Yeah, it's funny when we're watching it at just the right moment. Where she's blundered this knight g. Yeah, so that's a move you kind of want to play, because it feels like you're keeping control and forcing black into. But you should just do this first, and then you've got like a really sort of nice control over the position. But this is actually, because if you do this and go a5, I think this is just too slow because of knight b6. But because he's done it this way around, which I'm not guaranteed given the time situation that Lizzie will find knight g5 at all. And what do we think? What's the odds that she's going to find knight g5? 1 billion to 1? No. I would say it's a 50-50. But when you know you've got a bad position, you've got to look around for moves like that. You know, knight g5 is not obvious because you first know she's taken, which is a blunder. That's what I say. Although still her position has improved. But I think after queen f6, I think it's probably still likely to lose, because still much easier to play for white. But knight g5 was tremendous. It's always knight jumps which are so hard, so easy to overlook. So the idea is if you take or go knight f3, double exclam. Gf does queen h3 and queen h2, mate. If you take with a rook, then I have pawn takes, got a big attack. Amazing idea. I wouldn't have seen that, I'll be honest. It's so much easier if you know, well, knight g5 is coming up on the computer. If you know that position, like you flip the board. And your opponent's gone queen there. I mean, I don't know if I don't think I would have found knight g5 either, to be honest. But if I had more time, maybe I would have found it. I don't think I'd have found it with 5 minutes on my clock either. Because it's like. But then again, you play the King's Indian. Why did you play the King's Indian? You play the King's Indian to sack your opponent, right? And you know, to go for Merc. You've always, you know, played the King's Indian against, or the white side against Mark Hebden. That's a great example of someone who plays the King's Indian, because he's always looking for action. He probably would have found knight G5 because it's, you know, he's good at kind of finding moves which are disruptive to the opponent, that are awkward to me. Knight G5 is a nice idea. But how do you defend against that? So if you take here, I go, yeah, because this probably doesn't work, right? That's why it's tough to find, because there's probably moves like G4 now. What's even your threat, actually? Maybe I can even just take that. So given that doesn't work, but this is a tougher idea to see. Knight F3, wow. And then this is just... So checking that. Engine check. Yeah, this is tremendous for that. So what about that move? It's just, yeah, it's just dead lost, yeah. Yeah, so I think it's a very hard idea to see, actually. But now I honestly think, he has gone B5, actually, which, yeah, is big improvement for white. But it's either taken on G7 first. Where's that country? What is that? I recognise that flag, but I can't. I think it's somewhere in Europe, right? It's not Bulgaria. It's kind of bugging me that I can't place that flag. If anyone can place that flag, leave it in the comments. But Divya versus Viashili is a big kind of all India clash, and they were both kind of prodigies. I played Viashili in Hastings years ago. Yeah, now she's... Oh no, Rookie 4, it's okay. Yeah, and she played like a brilliant move against me, and I was like, wow, she's like some sort of genius. I did win the game, but she was much younger then, you know, so it's not surprising that I managed to win, because I'm much higher rated. But it made me realise, yeah, these sort of like this Prague family is just something very special. They've both got that kind of genius kind of level. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. And please leave your comments down below and please subscribe.